a microphone, a former NFL quarterback, and one sentence that ended up dominating headlines for 2 straight weeks. Robert Griffin III claimed people close to Angel Reese told him she's grown to hate Caitlin Clark.
Clark's Indiana Fever would take the victory over Reese in the Chicago Sky.
No footage, no named source, just a secondhand claim tied to a real complaint about how differently the two get treated in the media. Then Clay Travis picked it up and pushed it further, arguing the conflict would actually be good for the league. Reese fired back, denying the characterization outright. So what's actually confirmed here, and what's just an allegation that outran the truth before anyone could check it? Let's break it all down in today's video. The claim, the amplifier, and what's really behind it. The origin of the viral claim. Every viral claim has a starting point, and this particular one has an unusually clear beginning, which is part of what makes it worth examining this closely, instead of just repeating it. Robert Griffin III, the former NFL quarterback turned media personality, made the claim during a public appearance in mid-July. His statement, as reported afterward, was that people close to Angel Reese, described broadly as members of her inner circle, had told him directly that she had come to dislike Caitlin Clark. Notably, he didn't frame this as his own personal read on their on-court interactions or body language.
Angel Reese was standing there on the right side, and then they called up Caitlin Clark to talk. And I want you to just focus on Angel.
He framed it specifically as something relayed to him secondhand, sourced from people he never identified publicly, then or since. That distinction matters more than it might seem to on first hearing it. There's a meaningful gap between someone saying, "I've watched their interactions closely, and I believe there's real tension here," and someone saying, "People who actually know her personally told me this is how she feels." The second version carries an implied credibility, the first simply doesn't. It suggests genuine inside access, a source with real proximity to Reese's private thoughts and conversations. But it also introduces an obvious problem. Without that source ever stepping forward, without any independent way to verify who they are or what exactly was said between them and RG3, the entire claim rests on nothing more than RG3's own account that the conversation happened the way he's describing it. RG3 didn't leave the claim isolated either. He tied it into a broader argument that Reese has faced a disproportionate amount of racially charged criticism throughout her career. Criticism that Clark, in his framing, has largely been spared from by comparison. In his telling, that disparity in treatment wasn't incidental to the alleged dislike. It was presented as central to it, almost explanatory, as if the frustration he was describing wasn't really rooted in basketball at all, but in years of watching two players covered in visibly different ways by fans and media alike. That's a genuinely serious claim to make on someone else's behalf, filtered entirely through a source nobody can name or question. It's worth sitting with that for a moment before moving forward. It's worth being fair here. The underlying observation about uneven media coverage isn't necessarily wrong on its own terms. Plenty of independent commentary over the past 3 years has drawn a similar comparison without any connection to RG3's claim at all. The specific issue is narrower than that. RG3 didn't simply point to a documented pattern in how the two players get covered. He used that pattern to explain a private emotional state, hatred specifically.
After the game, both Clark and Reese would address the foul, labeling the incident as a basketball play.
That he then attributed directly to Reese, based entirely on a conversation nobody else has independently confirmed took place, in the exact terms he described it. It's also fair to ask what RG3 himself gains from making a claim like this publicly, separate from whether it's accurate. He's built a substantial media career partly on commentary that generates discussion, and a claim involving two of the NBA's most searched names guarantees exactly that kind of discussion, regardless of its accuracy. That doesn't automatically mean the claim was made in bad faith or fabricated outright. People relay things they've genuinely heard, sometimes imperfectly, sometimes with real conviction that what they're passing along is accurate. But it's worth holding two things at once here. RG3 may believe entirely that what he said was true, and the claim may still turn out to be exaggerated, softened in the retelling, or simply inaccurate. Sincerity and accuracy aren't the same thing, and secondhand claims are exactly where that gap tends to show up most. Once that combination was out in the world, a specific, damaging emotional claim, backed by an unnamed source, wrapped around a legitimate and pre-existing grievance about media coverage, it had everything it needed to travel fast. And it did exactly that, almost immediately. There's also a question worth asking about timing that rarely gets raised in the coverage of claims like this one. RG3's comments arrived during a period when women's basketball media coverage was already saturated with rivalry-driven content, game recaps competing for clicks against reaction videos competing against pure speculation pieces. A claim framed around private emotion, rather than public statistics or on-court behavior, cuts through that saturation differently. It doesn't require the audience to parse a box score or interpret a foul call. It offers something simpler and more immediately shareable. An alleged feeling, attached to two of the most searched names in the sport. That alone doesn't tell us anything about whether the claim is accurate, but it does help explain why, accurate or not, it was always going to spread quickly the moment it entered the conversation. The power of amplification. A claim like this one doesn't spread on its own momentum. It needs someone with real reach, willing to pick it up and repeat it to a wider audience. And in this particular case, that role fell to Clay Travis. Travis didn't simply mention RG3's comments in passing, and he didn't approach them with any visible skepticism either. He leaned directly into the claim, and in doing so, took the argument somewhere RG3 himself hadn't quite gone in his original comments. His position, laid out publicly, was essentially that even if the claim were fully accurate, even if Reese genuinely did dislike Clark on some real level,
here comes Reese, splitting the difference, equally of a tough shot.
That wouldn't actually be a problem for the league at all. It would be an asset worth leaning into. His reasoning was blunt and unapologetic. Rivalries, even openly hostile ones, generate sustained attention, and a rapidly growing league benefits from that attention, regardless of whether it originates from admiration or from friction. It's worth pausing here on why that framing matters, separate entirely from whether you personally agree with the underlying argument. Travis's commentary effectively treated the actual truth of RG3's claim as secondary to its usefulness as a storyline. Whether Reese genuinely feels this way became almost beside the point in how he discussed it. What mattered, in his framing, was that the story existed at all and that it could be leveraged for engagement and attention. That's a meaningfully different function than straightforward reporting. It's amplification for its own sake, built on top of a foundation that was never independently confirmed in the first place, by anyone, at any point in this chain. This is also where an unverified claim like this one tends to pick up something genuinely dangerous, momentum that outpaces the actual evidence supporting it. Once a second larger platform repeats a claim, especially one that adds its own argument or spin on top of the original, that claim starts to feel considerably more solid than it actually is. Audiences encountering the story for the first time through Travis's commentary weren't necessarily hearing the full, accurate framing of RG3 said an unnamed source told him this. Many were hearing something that read more like an accepted starting premise, a foundation for a larger argument about what's good for the league's growth, rather than a genuinely contested claim still resting entirely on second-hand, unverifiable sourcing. That's the underlying mechanical problem with amplification in stories built this way. It doesn't require the amplifier to fabricate anything new or add false details of their own. It only requires repeating the original claim with enough confidence and enough reach that the audience gradually stops asking the more basic question of where the claim actually came from in the first place. Worth noting too, Travis's platform doesn't operate under the same editorial standards a traditional sports desk might. That's not a criticism of the format itself. Plenty of commentary-driven media operates this way, and audiences generally understand what they're getting when they tune in. But it does mean the claim moved from an unnamed source statement on one platform to an argument-driven amplification on a second platform without passing through anything resembling a verification step in between. Two platforms, two audiences, and at no point did either audience receive confirmation beyond RG3's own account of what he says he was told.
Guys, it's so obvious that Angel Reese hates Caitlin Clark.
Reese breaks her silence. Reese didn't stay silent on any of this. She addressed the claim directly and publicly, pushing back firmly on the way her private feelings toward Clark had been characterized to a national audience without her input. What's genuinely notable here isn't just that she responded at all. It's what a response like this can and cannot actually accomplish once a claim has already spread this widely across platforms. A denial, even a clear, direct, and unambiguous one, doesn't erase the original claim from circulation entirely. It simply becomes another data point layered into the same ongoing story, sitting right alongside the original allegation, rather than fully replacing it in the public conversation. Some meaningful portion of the audience that encountered RG3's original claim will likely never come across Reese's response at all. Some portion that ends up hearing both versions will simply believe whichever one already matched what they wanted to believe about her going in. This dynamic is worth naming plainly, because it's genuinely one of the more frustrating aspects of stories built entirely on unverified claims. The person actually being discussed gets placed in a position where she has to publicly respond to something she never said herself, describing a private conversation she wasn't even part of, relayed secondhand by someone she may not personally know at all. Her denial is real, and it's on the record permanently now, but it exists in a structurally weaker position than the original claim did, simply because of how stories like this move through the public consciousness. The accusation always gets the head start, and the response is left permanently playing catch-up to it. None of this actually tells us, one way or another, whether RG3's original claim was accurate to begin with. It's entirely possible his described source existed and said precisely what he's claimed they said. It's equally possible the underlying claim was exaggerated somewhere along the way, misremembered, or based on a much softer original comment that got sharpened considerably into the word hate, somewhere between the initial conversation and RG3's eventual public retelling of it.
This is a still shot. After the foul that Caitlin Clark put on Angel Reese tried to hit her.
Reese's pushback doesn't resolve that underlying uncertainty definitively. No single statement from either side realistically could, given that the claim was never independently verifiable from the outside to begin with. What her response does confirm, with total certainty, is that she is now on the record disputing the characterization publicly, which is itself a meaningful and entirely verifiable fact, wholly separate from whatever the actual underlying truth turns out to be. It's also worth considering what a fuller, more conclusive response would have realistically required from Reese here, and why that bar is almost impossible to clear in a situation like this one. Proving a negative, especially an emotional negative, isn't something any public statement can accomplish cleanly. She can say she doesn't feel the way RG3 described. She can't produce evidence of an absence of a feeling, the same way footage might settle a factual dispute about what happened on a basketball court. That asymmetry between how easy it is to allege a private emotion and how hard it is to definitively disprove one sits at the center of why claims like this one linger so much longer than claims built around verifiable, observable events. Compare that to how a similar claim might play out if it involves something verifiable instead of an emotion, a claim about a specific incident, a specific date, a specific interaction that could theoretically be checked against video, schedules, or other witnesses. Those claims can eventually be settled, one way or the other, because there's something external to check them against. A claim about how someone privately feels toward a colleague has no equivalent external record. There's no footage of a feeling. There's no schedule that confirms or denies an emotion. That's precisely why this category of claim tends to be the stickiest kind in sports media. Not because it's more believable than other claims, but because it's structurally the hardest to ever fully resolve either way, for either side. The rivalry behind the headlines. This particular claim didn't land in isolation, and understanding the backdrop it arrived on top of explains a lot about why it caught fire as fast as it genuinely did. The Clark-Reese storyline traces back to April 2023, when Reese, closing out an LSU win over Iowa in the national championship game,
LSU has captured its very first national championship,
made a gesture directed at Clark that would end up following both players for years afterward. Clark answered the following season with a 41-point performance in a rematch that became the single most watched women's college basketball broadcast ever recorded on television. That exchange effectively set the tone for everything that's followed since, a rivalry both players have periodically downplayed directly in interviews, even as new flashpoints keep arriving on a rhythm that makes the downplaying genuinely hard to fully accept at face value anymore. Since entering the NBA together as part of the 2024 draft class, the two have been compared constantly across nearly every measurable category: scoring averages, jersey sales figures, national television ratings, and increasingly, direct comparisons around pay. Clark currently holds a 5-3 head-to-head edge across their professional matchups to date, though 2026 has genuinely shifted that dynamic somewhat, with Reese and the Atlanta Dream taking 2 of 3 meetings against Clark's Fever already this season. The financial gap between the two players has widened considerably as well. Reese's rookie-scale contract currently sits at roughly $350,000 for the 2026 season, while Clark's overall earnings, boosted substantially by a marquee Nike endorsement deal, sit in an entirely different tier by comparison. That disparity has increasingly become part of the broader public conversation surrounding both players, regardless of how either of them personally chooses to address it. Then, less than 3 weeks after RG3's claim first made headlines, a completely separate moment added yet another layer to all of this. A widely circulated clip from the NBA All-Star Game in Chicago, showing Reese's applause visibly pausing at the exact second Clark's name was announced during a post-game recognition segment. Taken entirely on its own, that clip was genuinely ambiguous. 3 seconds of footage honestly open to more than one reasonable interpretation, but it never actually got evaluated on its own merits by most of the audience encountering it. It landed directly on top of the hate claim that was still actively circulating from weeks earlier, and audiences already primed by RG3's original framing read that new clip almost entirely through that exact lens, often within minutes of first seeing it. That's the real function of a claim like RG3's, regardless of whether it ultimately turns out to be accurate or not. It doesn't just exist as one isolated statement sitting in the news cycle. It becomes a permanent lens that every subsequent ambiguous moment automatically gets filtered through afterward, whether that new moment actually has any genuine connection to the original claim or not. There's a parallel worth drawing here too, because this isn't the first time an unnamed source claim has shaped how the public reads these two players. Throughout their college careers and into the professional ranks, both Clark and Reese have periodically been the subject of claims about teammates' private opinions, about locker room dynamics, about off-court friction with other players around the league that trace back to similarly vague sourcing. Most of those claims never get resolved one way or the other. They simply fade as the news cycle moves on, replaced by the next storyline, without ever being confirmed or definitively debunked. RG3's claim looks, at this point, like it may follow the same trajectory: impossible to fully verify, impossible to fully dismiss, destined to remain a permanent asterisk attached to how some segment of the audience understands this rivalry going forward. The rumor that went viral. Strip away every layer of speculation stacked on top of this story, and here's what can genuinely be said with real confidence. RG3 made the claim publicly in mid-July 2026, attributing it directly to unnamed people described as close to Reese. That much is fully on the record and isn't in any real dispute. Clay Travis amplified the claim afterward and argued separately that even a genuinely real rivalry would ultimately benefit the league. Also confirmed, also fully on the record. Reese responded publicly, pushing back firmly on the characterization of her private feelings, confirmed as well, beyond any reasonable question. What remains entirely unconfirmed, and likely will stay that way permanently through any public channel, is whether the underlying claim was actually accurate to begin with. Nobody outside Reese's genuine inner circle can meaningfully verify what was or wasn't said in whatever specific conversation RG3 is describing. The source was never named at any point. The exact wording was never independently corroborated by anyone else. None of that makes the original claim automatically false on its face. It simply means it remains, permanently, an allegation rather than an established fact, regardless of how many times it continues getting repeated or how confidently it gets amplified by the next person who picks it up. What's genuinely more interesting than the claim itself, if you step back from it, is how little actual verification it needed to travel as far and as fast as it ultimately did. A secondhand claim from an entirely unnamed source became a national headline within days. That headline got amplified further by a second commentator who layered his own argument directly on top of it. And within a matter of weeks, that same original claim was actively shaping how large audiences interpreted a completely separate, genuinely ambiguous moment involving both players months later. At no single point in that entire chain did the original claim require actual independent confirmation to keep moving forward through the news cycle. It only ever required enough people willing to keep repeating it. This is worth generalizing slightly, because it's not unique to this particular claim or these particular two players. Unverified, emotionally charged claims about public figures have a structural advantage over careful, hedged reporting in almost every media environment built around engagement and speed. A hedge, sources say, though this hasn't been independently confirmed, reads as less compelling than a flat assertion, even when the hedge is the more honest version of the same information. That's not a flaw specific to RG3, or to Travis, or to the audiences who shared this story. It's closer to a built-in feature of how claims like this move once they enter a media ecosystem optimized for speed over verification. Recognizing that pattern doesn't tell you whether this specific claim is true. It does tell you why you should treat its rapid spread as evidence of its virality, not as evidence of its accuracy. So where does this leave us? A claim from an unnamed source, an amplifier who cared more about attention than accuracy, a denial that came too late to fully undo the damage, and a rivalry now permanently carrying this story alongside it, whether the claim was ever true or not. We don't know if Angel Reese hates Caitlin Clark. Nobody outside her inner circle does, RG3 included, unless he names his source. What we do know is how fast an unverified claim can travel once the right person amplifies it. Do you believe RG3's sourcing, or does this feel manufactured? Drop your verdict below and subscribe. This story isn't over